Hello, everybody. Welcome to CoinFund Q&A. Today we have Maxim Ismailov from WindingTree.com. WindingTree is a decentralized marketplace for travel inventory, which includes hotel rooms and plane tickets, and Max will tell us more about that. Max, welcome. Thank you for joining. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the project?
Jake, thank you for having me here, and kudos for pronouncing my name correctly. So, WindingTree is, as Jake said, is a decentralized platform for transferring, we call it inventory, and air quotes, travel inventory, which, yes, includes hotel rooms, airline tickets, car rental, availability, and all that kind of stuff. So, as you know, probably, people who are watching this live stream, they know that blockchain is designed to disrupt and disintermediate all kinds of different marketplaces, right? So we're applying a similar logic. If Bitcoin is a financial system without intermediaries, then WindingTree is a travel distribution system without intermediaries. And currently, the problem in the travel industry is that there are only 5 companies that own the majority of all that inventory. They're basically sitting in the middle of all the transactions, just like banks, and prevent innovation, charge crazy transaction fees, and just make the life of travel companies harder. And those 5 companies are Expedia and Priceline. That's on the hotel side of things, and their market share, believe it or not, is 93% in the United States. That excludes, of course, direct hotel bookings when you go to the hotel and just book a room right there, or maybe you go to the hotel website. And in terms of airline distribution, we call it, there are 3 companies, Amadeus, Travelport, and Sabre, that own virtually 99% of, again, non-direct bookings. Yeah, so that's the problem statement. And again, just like Bitcoin potentially can replace certain functionality of banks, not everything, because Bitcoin cannot give you a loan. It would be great if someone built a company like that. But of course, WindingTree, in the same manner, just decentralizes this marketplace, the travel marketplace.
Awesome. So I love that you have a specific problem in mind that your project is trying to solve. That's always great to hear. And can you tell us a little bit about sort of your own background and how you got interested in this market in general, and then we'll dive in a little bit more about how WindingTree works.
Right. I'm a software engineer by training, I guess. I never learned computer science in school. I just taught everything myself. And I was working on all kinds of different projects, actually. But in the past, I would say 6 years, I was working on travel projects, and with one of the companies, with Windstorm, I went through Y Combinator in 2014, so three years ago. Time flies. And after we started working on Roomstorm, and spend a year trying to work with those intermediaries that I mentioned, we have just realized that something has to change. And of course, I've been watching all sorts of technologies that are out there, and blockchain just made sense to me, right? And I'm like, hey, if the problem in travel space is precisely that, the usurpation of power, those intermediaries today, they have too much power. Then the blockchain is just a perfect solution for that problem. So that's how it started.
Yeah, I mean, what we see in blockchain is that it is a perfect, almost like a perfect use case for blockchain is the marketplace use case.
Exactly.
And so essentially, to recap this for the 1000th time, but very saliently, normally you have a provider of a marketplace, think Amazon, or think one of these travel companies that you're describing. They build the software and like the physical infrastructure of the marketplace, and therefore, they have to expend to do that. They have to collect rent, and their business model is usually taking a cut of the transactions that occur between buyers and sellers and whatever that marketplace is. what happens when you move a marketplace into the blockchain domain is that now you have a decentralized network that underlies the infrastructure of the marketplace. And you still have to pay fees, obviously. It costs money to utilize that infrastructure, but you are sort of, you have the pleasant feeling of knowing that your fees are going kind of to operate the infrastructure more or less at cost, and you're not sort of compensating, let's say, private interests that have their own, needs, desires, and maybe like a political agenda at the end of the day. You're actually just compensating the cold metal machine hardware, if you will, in processing the transaction. And then otherwise, you're directly interacting with your marketplace counterparty.
Yeah, there's a great tweet storm from Naval Ravikant, from Angelist. I think it's like 32 tweets or something like that. And the first tweet says, marketplace will be, all kinds of different marketplaces will be decentralized by the blockchain technology. And I think if you Google Naval tweet storm, that thing may come up, because maybe it's my personalized search, but that's how I look for it. I'm like, damn, I want to read it again. But yeah, basically, the analogy I make when I'm explaining what WindingTree is and how the blockchain technology helps, right, is the example of Uber. And I've done my extensive research on how Uber operates even before all those scandals that were happening, in the beginning of this year. I was researching forums where drivers, they just talk about how, especially new drivers, they don't even make minimum wage after, the asset deprecation. Basically, they're paying, I don't know, car payments, the servicing, the cleaning of the car, and all that stuff, and they're not even making minimum wage today.
Why do you think that is? Is it because Uber is inefficient? Is it because it's greedy? Or is it because the business model, let's say, is not even sustainable?
That's a great question. I think it's like every 5 to 9 job, right? It's like they're squeezing the last drop out of you, right? they leave you just enough so you don't stop. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's inefficiencies. Maybe they don't see that happening. But you remember, of course, that video of Travis and the Uber driver that was giving him a ride and like complaining, "Hey, dude, I went bankrupt because of you," right? What happened, and the reason for what's happened, it's precisely that Uber is not a decentralized company, right? So what they can do, or that's what they've done in the very beginning, they raised a ton of money, a lot of money, and they subsidized all the rides. Therefore, the commission fee for drivers was 5%. That is, drivers were taking back home 95% of the amount of the ride. And rides were subsidized. Do you remember that time when, hey, Uber is so much cheaper than a taxi, of course I'm gonna do an Uber. But today, the prices are kind of back up, right? They're on par, maybe slightly cheaper, or like kind of on the same level, right? So what Uber did, of course, with that crazy amount of money that they raised, they subsidized all the rides. The commission fee was 5%, but guess what? Now they have to make money, right? So the commission fee today, as far as I know, it was 20% definitely a few months ago, and Uber was testing 25%, right? But they hooked everyone up. They put everyone onto this platform and kind of made everyone addicted to that platform. And now kind of you just have that app on your phone, and this is just your default option, right? With blockchain, and that's the definition of smart contracts, right? Smart contracts are immutable. So we cannot, with WindingTree, we cannot just say, hey guys, the transaction fee on our platform will be 0.1%, but then when you have de facto a monopoly, and Uber is a monopoly in all kinds of different places, right? And Uber now can say, when it's a monopoly, the transaction fee is not 5% anymore. Hey, guess what? It's 25%, and you don't have a choice, so you have to pay. And people are just stuck with those applications. So, and that's kind of what happened in the travel industry as well, because all those intermediaries were created, not all of them, but some of them were created by airlines. So airlines in the United States, they created Sabre. They said, we're building all the same tech. How about we just outsource it to this one company, and that company will do everything for us. So it was a separate company, and then that company realized that it has all that power, and started charging more, and started squeezing, on both ends the airline industry in the United States. The same story with European airlines that created Amadeus. That's the European counterpart of Sabre. They are competitors, but you know how it works in an oligopolistic marketplace. They constantly watch each other in terms of prices and stuff, and that's how oligopolistic market works.
Cool. So I think that we've established that the marketplace use case, like especially in the case of airlines and hotel rooms and other travel kind of services and products, that's a very natural use case for blockchain. What you're alluding to is kind of some of the properties of, I guess, like capitalist companies and how they try to monopolize markets. And, that's really true. Actually, there was like a tweet, I think, from Fred Ursum the other day where he's like, I went to YC Demo Day and like 70 companies were on network effects. Oh, no, he was like, there's like 130 companies and 70 of them were network effect companies, right, building their business models, in other words, on the network effect of their product. And 2 of them were blockchain products. And I'm kind of like, well, are the other 58 companies like built on hope? Because at the end of the day, all of these things have to build network effects. And even though, like, I've been starting to realize that even though blockchains kind of provide this open platform, and a protocol and theoretically something that that everyone can kind of use because it's in a way it's like public infrastructure. Despite that, you still have competitive protocols.
Yep.
Right. And so each individual protocol, even though it's open and that's like a little bit of a better world, they still kind of compete for the same markets.
For the same users. For sure.
Right, for the same users and for the same markets. So can you talk a little bit about how you see, first of all, like who the users are of WindingTree, who their counterparty on the marketplace is specifically, and how do you think there's going to be competition between decentralized marketplaces doing travel products?
Versus decentralized marketplaces versus centralized, or decentralized versus decentralized?
Specifically, decentralized versus decentralized. Is that I think with the proliferation of all this of ICOs and the activities in blockchain, I think like it's inevitable that now almost every vertical has at least 1 or 2 competitors, or sorry, 2 or 3 competitors, and then more often than not, they're trying to implement kind of a general protocol. So how does that play out for everybody?
So we have one competitor, TravelCoin. They were just raising money via PayPal. So this is, of course, something that we're not afraid of. Very, very funny, guys. Just check out those videos. So for now, I don't think we have any competition. All the projects that we've seen so far in the travel space are either centralized, some sort of private or consortium blockchains. And I was presenting our ideas to a number of companies, and some of them, the challenge that we have is that those companies, those big organizations, they just cannot wrap their head around how is that we use a completely decentralized platform? How is it that we're not in complete control of the system? They just don't get it. So they go with private blockchains, which is an interesting oxymoron, of course. And other projects that we've seen is just a complete scam. There is, the one that I mentioned. And so right now we don't have competition. We do love competition. I think what we're trying to do with WindingTree, and that's, we say that on our website, we say that in our white paper, we want to enable innovation in the travel industry, because there has been no innovation in the travel industry for a long, long time. This is not just my opinion. This is an opinion of our advisor, Norm Rose, he's a household name in the travel industry. And there's been no innovation precisely because all access to the data today, if you let's say a hotel or you're a travel startup and you want to access data from the hotel, right? And you're a hotel and you perhaps want to give your data availability and prices to the startup, you have to work with one of those intermediaries. Their tech, I don't even know, probably a lot of people here are very, very tech savvy. I'm a software engineer myself, and the level of the technological development in the travel industry it's 10 years behind. Some people say 20, 30 years behind. Like airline systems still use mainframes. Hotels or those aggregators, those intermediaries still use XML APIs, which is crazy. It's 2017, for God's sake, right? But I've diverged, so let me answer your question. In terms of competition, so far there's none, but we welcome that competition. What we want to do, and that's our motto, is collaboration, right? For such a long time, there was no collaboration in the travel industry. One of the projects that I work on is called Travel Tech Con. It's a series of events, it's meetups and conference for travel startups. And I started it with my partner Marina a few years ago, in about 2015, I would say. And when we started doing that, we realized that there were no events for travel startups. None, zero. More than that, there are no open source projects in the travel space at all. What is going on here? And that's when I started thinking about, hey, what's going on? I think intermediaries is just part of the problem. And another problem is just the community was so dispersed. So our motto is collaboration. We welcome input. Our project, of course, will be open source. All the smart contracts will be published online. All the systems that we'll be developing will be open source. In fact, the legal form of our organization is a nonprofit foundation, which we are in the process of incorporating right now. So that's our philosophy. I think what the innovation that we're bringing to the table here in the travel space is that we're bringing this completely different thinking. It's open source, it's nonprofit, it's collaboration, and that's something that hasn't been done in the travel industry yet.
Sorry, so do you see WindingTree as kind of the software that you're building, basically a decentralized network, but really just you're a software provider, and then you kind of get the software installed inside of other companies within that industry? Or do you see WindingTree as like the underlying protocol with an application built on top that you guys build, and then that application actually becomes the, what users interact with when
right. It's just the underlying protocol. It's just the underlying protocol, and we actually want other people to build stuff on top of our platform. We don't want to build all the interfaces. There's absolutely no desire to be the one intermediary. And a lot of people compare blockchain as the protocol layer to the HTTP protocol layer, right? Which is, again, completely decentralized, disowned by CERN back in 1993. And that's our idea. All we want to do here is to make travel industry, I don't know, mainstream again, because right now we live in the world that's 10, 20 years behind. And that's very frustrating. And that's why we haven't seen any mega successful travel projects, travel startups, with, of course, the exception of Airbnb, but they created completely new market, right? Which is good for them. But now they actually, in the travel space, they've already become an intermediary. In terms of vacation rental industry, there are 3 companies that you can go to, and Airbnb is one of them. And they're, again, you have no choice.
Got it. And so do you see them, building out this network, building out this platform, building out the protocol, and then just hypothetically, right, just going off and getting some provider, I don't know, Orbitz, I'm just like throwing something out there.
Right.
Do you see kind of pitching a big company like that, a big industry incumbent, and saying, adopt this protocol and you will get extra kind of deal flow, right, or customer flow?
So that's part of the pitch for sure, because we're not saying that, hey, all those intermediaries as companies, they have to go. Absolutely not. What fundamentally has to go here is this business model where you get money, you are able to charge your clients a certain amount of money, not because you deliver a lot of value, but just because you can, right? So that type of mentality, that type of business model, blockchain can remove that from those marketplaces, right? And a lot of marketplaces out there are completely centralized. So you said Orbitz. Orbitz belongs, I don't remember to which company exactly, but it belongs either to Priceline or Expedia. And again, Kayak belongs to Priceline. Booking.com belongs to Priceline. You have an illusion that you have a choice. You have no choice. Those companies, they can stay and benefit from the protocol that we're building. It's just that they will have to change their business models. So, I was talking to this gigantic travel company here in Europe, and they said, we're sitting on heaps and heaps of data. We know when you go to your hotel room, what you order at the bar, when you opened your hotel room, what kind of TV programs, or God forbid, maybe some porn that you watched on that screen, right? They know all of that stuff. They could provide very, very personalized services to you, right? They know a lot of stuff. But what they're saying is that because they're sitting on a gold mine, they have no incentive to do anything about that. They have a lot of data. They do not leverage that data whatsoever. So guess what? Now you remove that gold mine. Now you remove that business model that benefits them, not because they deliver a lot of value to you, but because they can. And all of a sudden, things started happening, right? Hey, how about we personalize this? How about we need to compete with these guys and that and those guys, and we need to improve the user experience and customer experience and all that stuff. So that's what fundamentally we want to do. Electrify things a little bit,
We have a question here in the YouTube chat, and I don't, feel free to decline to answer this if you don't want to, but it says, Xavier asked, Maxime, have you approached any hotel chain?
Yes, we have.
Right. All right. Well, that's settled. Awesome. So now, as we reach sort of the midway point here, it's our favorite part of the show where we talk about the token. I believe that's called the Leaf token. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Correct. It's LIF. Yeah.
LIF token. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about how the token interacts with the protocol? What is it used for? Is it a security by any chance?
Never. No, of course not. So it's LIF. It's LIF with that little thing on top of the eye. And actually, if you look it up, there's an interesting Nordic philosophy about that. But anyway, the token is used for two things on our platform. So one is payments, so actual transfer of value. Our platform consists of two main parts. First of all, it's the set smart contracts to govern the relationship between, let's say, airline on one side and a travel agency on the other side. And by travel agency, I mean it's a very general term, right? It could be your iPhone app that you've built. It could be a website that you've built where you combine hotels, flights, car rentals, tours and activities into one bundle and sell to someone, right? So that's a travel agency, right? So those are different sides of the marketplace. So we require LIF. We require those companies to have LIF in order to transact value on that marketplace. So the hotel room, let's say it will cost let's say 10 LIF. So that transaction will happen on our network using the LIF token. And with the new release of the Ethereum platform, we're building our tech on top of the Ethereum platform, of course. We'll be able to, or participants of the marketplace will be able to pay for transaction fees with LIF as well, right? So that's one part of the platform. Of course, as you understand, when you have smart contracts that are by definition immutable, so you're not an Uber, for example, right? That when you go back and change a transaction fee to 25% just because you can. In order for us to upgrade those smart contracts in a completely decentralized manner, what's required next to this platform is a governance platform where all the holders of the token, when they opt in into that feature, they can participate in the governance of the platform. That is to suggest updates for the smart contracts, create maybe some new smart contracts, and just generally, because the project is open source, just generally influence the direction of the platform in the right way. And again, the key here, there was a great paper from Ralph Merkel, maybe a little bit too idealistic, but I just love his vision about DAO and democracy and prediction marketplaces, about how with a prediction marketplace you can actually govern in his
democracy paper.
Exactly. Yeah. So the idea is to have a system like that, and we're still defining the rules of this governance platform. But for any decentralized protocol, for any decentralized platform, I think governance is the keystone today. If you don't have good governance, if you haven't aligned the incentives around the platform in the right way, it's going to be a problem, probably. So that's something that we're working very hard today, defining those governance rules, and of course, in addition to building all those smart contracts for airlines, hotels, etc.
Yeah, so this is a very general problem. I think that it applies, equally to token-based projects that give the token holders a measure of governance, as much as it applies to the governance of the open source projects that create blockchains like Bitcoin project and Ethereum project. And I think the space has finally, over the last year and a half or so, has really, especially with the DAO events of last summer, really realized like how important governance is and what a value proposition it really is for networks. I mean, it's the crucial value proposition. And
right.
So let me just throw out a few thoughts there that may maybe just interesting for you to look at in the course of researching governance. Yesterday at the, I think, New York City Ethereum meetup, there was a Democracy Earth presenting, and they wrote like. Sorry?
I know Santiago too well. I was just tweeting.
So I just thought that it was the paper that they presented was one of the more in-depth kind of treatments of governance, and it was really great to see a team thinking about it on that level. And then on the technical level, you might know that I'm an advisor to the Aragon project, which specifically thinks about modular and upgradable DAO networks. And so they've put in a lot of thought into how do you make not just a governance system, but a system where you can get to a governance system that actually works for you by being modular and maybe even evolving some of those modules over time, or customizing some of those modules. So I thought those might be interesting kind of avenues to explore, or just take a look at or be aware of.
Yeah, I've read through the Democracy.Earth white paper, and as I mentioned, I know Santi, and he went through Y Combinator in 2016. I think, and he's a great guy. He connected me with a bunch of people actually that we'll work with in Argentina. So that's great. So anyone who's watching from Argentina, hola. But yeah, governance, it's the hard part. It's the hard part. And I just had a conversation yesterday with one of our potential investors, or maybe advisors, or maybe a partner. And his opinion is that he said Ethereum just got lucky, and all the projects that are out there right now in live, and we're not including those mega successful ICOs, but without like real user traction. Ethereum, for example, and we know that Bitcoin governance is not ideal, right? It has a long way to go. There's a lot of room for improvement, and so yeah, that guy said that again, Ethereum just got lucky. Somehow the token economy rules were defined in such a way that it's scalable, and the governance, and again, on Ethereum, governance is not ideal either. Yes. Yeah, we know everything that's happened last year, and
so what like in the course of studying governance for your project, like where do you what do you think are promising avenues? Like, is it better as a dictatorship? Is it better as a democracy? Is it better with like delegation of voting? Like, what are your general thoughts on how that should work?
You know, it's hard to say what's going to win. You know, I don't generally like predicting things. I think that this is how life evolves, right? We have 10 different things. In Silicon Valley, we say fail fast, not because you want to fail fast, but because you want to try all those, 99 things that didn't work and find one that worked. But definitely prediction marketplaces are very exciting, path. Delegative democracy is an interesting solution for sure. And there's a whole range in between. And, last time, I think in March, I was at a conference in New Zealand. There's liquid democracy, of course, and there is, I don't remember the term, but dude was so excited about that type of governance that he came up with. We're definitely going to play with the idea of prediction marketplaces. And the fundamental, economic theory here is very simple. That's been defined, in the 70s or the 80s of the last century by Milton Friedman, of course. And the idea is that the best for society is your best contribution to the society as a whole when you work for a company is for that company, for the share price of that company to go up, right? If you do that, everything's golden. Not just you make a lot of money, but also the society as a whole benefits from that. But that theory, that idea has a fundamental flaw. It doesn't include, it doesn't take into consideration the tragedy of commons, right? And a lot of people talk about that in the blockchain space, right? Because if you're a big factory in the Philippines and it's much cheaper for you to dump your toxic waste right into the next river where, these people live, guess what? That increases the share price because you don't have to pay for the cleaning facilities and stuff, right? But the key here, I think, in a lot of governance projects is to include all kinds of different parties into that governance, right? So in the case of that factory, those people who live right next to that river should be included in the governance of that platform. And again, Ralph Merkel in his white paper, he talks, about, again, if it's a country, everyone is included, everyone has a say, and it kind of works out beautifully, right? And again, maybe in the short term, everything is going very smoothly, a certain change is beneficial for the whole society, but maybe in the long term, it's not beneficial. So you have to take the future into consideration as well. So there's a lot of ideas here, and I probably can talk for hours about all those things. And maybe when we meet up with Santiago at some point, we're gonna talk about all that stuff. But yeah, definitely
very, very cool. Thank you for your thoughts there. And it's a fascinating and very large topic. And I think I think many different projects in blockchain will try different approaches. And my sense is that, like my favorite mode of thinking about governance is that it will evolve. You can apply a software development life cycle kind of time span to the evolution of these governance systems, where in sort of the real world, in the context of governance or corporations, it's really a much more slow and crawling process. So I'm very excited about seeing what kind of governance system evolves. And I definitely want to touch upon kind of the economics of your token sale offering, but to set the stage there, can you tell us a little bit about sort of your team and how long you've been building WindingTree? I know you and I spoke, Maxim, probably what 3 or 4 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, it was around April probably.
Yeah, and so this is not a project for anybody listening. This is not a project that appeared overnight. This is something that Maxime has been working on for a while. And can you tell us, kind of the team that you've built around this, and sort of the budget that you anticipate to get out into production?
Huh. Great question. So the team actually is easy. So it's myself, it's Jakub Wysoki, with whom I worked for the past 10 years on all sorts of software projects, including my previous company, Roomstorm. And then we have two amazing engineers out of Argentina, by the way, and I think those connections came through Santiago, and it's like a chain of people there. But blockchain in Argentina, it's very hot. So if you want to hire a bunch of really great engineers, just go to Buenos Aires and do some tango, eat some milanesas, and find some great engineers. And the fifth person, so it's a five people team right now. The fifth person is the guy who I was just instantly impressed when I met him about his business skills, like his thinking, his way of thinking. He's a capitalist, definitely, and I just love how he thinks about business. And his name is Petra Anderson, so he's in charge of business development. So that's in terms of the team. Our advisory board includes some of very well-known names in the travel industry and in crypto space as well. One of our advisors, crypto advisors, is Manuel Aros from Zeppelin. And in terms of the travel space, so I mentioned Norm Rose, who is one of the senior consultants for Focusrite, which is the biggest consultancy, travel consultancy out there. And he constantly talks to the enemy, we call it, right? So all those intermediaries, right? It's Johnny Thorson, who sold his company to one of those intermediaries, and he's been in the travel industry for decades. It's Douglas Rice, who's one of the founders of HTNG, which is this group of hotels that, again, are trying to come up with standards for data exchange and organizing events and all that stuff. And of course, William Yadlik, who is one of the investors in Tezos, but he's built Vayana.com. I don't remember who he sold it to, but hopefully not one of those guys. And of course, Matt Danzig, with whom I worked for a long time. So very diverse team, very diverse advisors, but with hundreds of years probably of experience in the travel industry. And in terms of, what was your second question, by the way?
Oh, just in terms of how are you thinking about the funding of the project? Because right, as we head into ICO, like, do you have an idea of how much money is going to take to get to production and what you want to devote funds toward?
Right. So, planning is guessing. I'm pretty sure that any startup out there would have three different plans for, whether if they received 1 million or 5 million, $10 million, they could have achieved all kinds of different things. And I'm sure everyone who's listening to or watching this video, they know how probably they could have spent $5 million working on their startup. So our goal, so here's the structure. It's a WindingTree Foundation that will be issuing the tokens. And what we've decided, we came up with this novel approach. I don't know how novel it is. Maybe a lot of people out there think about that. We decided not to limit the amount of funding and the number of tokens that we're going to receive. And hey, stop, don't do that. Like, hey, this is an unlimited sale. No, we have a mechanism which we call market validation mechanism, right? So the foundation for the first 2 years, 2 or 4 years, depending on the amount of funds raised, is going to put all the funds above $10 million into a separate smart contract that we will not be able to touch for a certain period of time. And that smart contract will be buying Lyft tokens back for a certain price, right? So the goal here is to enable all the backers, all the contributors to this nonprofit project with the goal of fostering innovation in the travel industry to recover their funds, to send those leaves that they've received after the token sale back to that smart contract and receive a certain amount of Ether back. And we'll be publishing the details about the token generation event very soon, probably in the next week or so. And again, we've consulted our advisors and our lawyers, and I think we came up with a really, really good solution that would work for everyone. And at the same time, it would avoid the problem of whales, a problem of participation, because we do want this project to be truly decentralized.
Awesome, that's great. So, and now in terms of the actual TGE. What's the amount you're looking to raise?
Right. So the maximum amount that we want to raise at the TGE is $10 million for 2 or 4 years, depending on the amount, the total amount of money that will be in the smart contract that I've described.
Got it. And you mentioned on your website that 7 million of the Lyft tokens will be available, and what's the total supply of Lyft tokens, so we get an idea of the...
Right. Actually, that information is out of date. We've just updated our token structure, and that information was in the first draft of our white paper, and which we're updating very soon as well with the new token generation event structure. So the total supply of tokens, we are not limiting that. So there will be a static price. So basically, we'll be sending a certain amount of Ether to a smart contract. It's a static price. You receive back a certain amount of leaf. And we do not limit the number of leaves generated. But of course, after the token generation event, if there were 10 million tokens generated, then that number will never increase. But actually, that number will go down because the smart contract, the market validation mechanism that we've designed, will be burning tokens when it will be receiving them from participants of the marketplace. So that's how we achieve validation.
Can you give us an idea of like how many tokens will be going into a public float versus how many tokens will be held by the company for operations and whatnot?
Right. So 75% of tokens, of all tokens, will be up for grabs.
Oh, wow.
20% the foundation will receive for founders, for advisors, for future employees, and 5% will receive for long-term foundation budget. But actually, those tokens will be received after 2 or 4 years, again, depending on how much we've raised, and those tokens will be released gradually over time, so there's no, there's not a huge inflation spike in the amount of tokens available for the market.
Awesome. So that's as far as the recent market, I think that's one of the larger floats that I've seen in recent memory. It was kind of interesting, first there was the era of like really big pre-mines, as people were doing crypto, like Bitcoin forks and stuff like that. And then it sort of flipped and said, no, the founders have to float like a majority of the tokens because like that's basically safer for investors. But then with the advent of smart contracts, the market kind of flipped back and said, yeah, but floating like all of a company's equity is not necessarily like the best strategy for a startup. Kind of depends what it is. And so people started floating a little bit less, and then sort of putting maybe like big chunks into foundation custody and saying like the foundation will custody rewards. And we've seen a bunch of models, including Kika Interactive, which we have worked with, go down that path. But it's, to me, a large float is always very favorable to the market because you end up coming out with sort of a smaller valuation. You end up, if you're a company that builds product and actually ships, then a lot of projects that come out kind of at more modest valuations in the sale end up building tremendous amounts of value in the secondary market. So I like that approach. And then for a protocol such as you guys are doing, I think it's a great idea to get as many tokens out into the public as you can. And with the advent of products like Civic, I know KYC is kind of a, it's a loaded methodology, and sort of a, still kind of a controversial methodology for crypto investors. But having digital identity has shown, like in the 0x pre-sale, for example, to be really great, because you increase the user base, you sort of cap every individual user, because now you can identify who individual users are. And what that also has the effect of doing is driving a lot of demand in the secondary, because people are like, $2,000, I want more token. And it seems to have worked really well for that project, and we have been recommending that kind of to a bunch of different people we've been talking to. So that's great. Thank you for that description. And I think I've asked you kind of all the questions that I wanted to ask, and this is really wonderful to see you make progress since the last time we spoke. What do you want people watching this to kind of know? What are the most important things to know about the product or sale from your point of view?
So without without promoting the project too much, we believe that we're definitely, it's a hard project, and it's going to take a while, and it's going to take a lot of effort and money and time, of course. But we sincerely believe that that's something that should happen in the travel industry. And I would personally like to see this type of projects, like truly decentralized. It's not where a certain number of investors or founders holds the majority of all the tokens, and therefore the power on the network. That's something that I would like to see in other industries. I'd like to say that we are probably one of the first decentralized projects that are solving real use cases in the world, the problems that exist today, because, I don't know, Bancor or EOS or Tezos, they're creating new blockchains. Actually, probably not basic attention token. So yeah, that's one of the projects that they're solving a real problem as well, right? But it's one of the first real applications of the blockchain technology, of decentralized ledgers, decentralized technologies. And I would like to see more of that. There's a whole number of industries out there that are very, very highly monopolized, like food production. Like I love the Democracy.Earth project, because yes, political systems are hard. They are very often corrupt. We should do something about that. That's kind of one of the logical applications of that technology. But did you know that sunglasses, for example, that the vast majority of all brands of sunglasses that Ray-Ban and Oakley's and all the others, are owned by one Italian company? Guess what? We should do something about that as well. You have no choice now. And I like what Andreas Antonopoulos says about decentralized projects. All those projects are about, truly decentralized, are about giving power back to the individual or organizations. And that's something we would like to do in the travel industry, absolutely. It's because, yeah, right now that power is concentrated in the hands of very, very few people. And now the Expedia CEO is going to be the CEO of Uber.
Right.
They were just announced. Yeah.
Awesome. Maxim, thank you very, very much for speaking to us about WindingTree. And that's definitely very on, that message that you just professed is very on trend here in our space. And I also would love to see kind of experiments performed in that world. For anybody who's joining us today, check out windingtree.com. They also, Maxim also has some information on the website about the token generation event, and that's going to be updated soon. You were saying that you're going to release a white paper within the next week or so?
So there is a white paper available, and largely it will stay the same, but we will update it with some new details, the token generation event details, the details about the WindingTree Foundation that we are working on the incorporation on, all that stuff. And then that's going to be the final version of the white paper before the token sale.
Cool. So if you're a community member, you can go and check out the white paper now. Maybe even leave some comments in the Google Doc.
For sure. I think the best way maybe to engage with the community is to join our Slack. There is a very, very lively conversation going in the general channel there. A lot of people asking questions. We generally try to be available. Sometimes we have to do some work, so maybe we're not available 24/7, so bear with us. But we'll definitely try and answer all the questions there and be as engaged as possible.
All right, fantastic. Check it out. Maxime, I'm going to end the broadcast here, but stick around for a minute, and we'll debrief.
Sounds good, man.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.